Lori, I need a direct report.
You're live.
All right, we're just waiting for one more of our presenters tonight. We'll be right back and we'll get started.
So when you go to that's where it's at. Hope shows up on mine, as I told that but he doesn't do anything. I think it'll work. Josh Falk is watching. Hello, Josh.
I understand that. Oh, look, Shirley, you're live. You did it. I did it.
Congressional District 9 Chair Warren Carpenter, Phil O'Halloran, Mark Fortin, Lori Skibo.
All right, there he is. All right, Braden, you take your seats.
I wish I could take pictures during the thing, so if you want to take pictures to share with Deanne.
All right, well, I want to start off tonight. We're a little bit behind schedule, 5 minutes, 6:05, by saying thank you so much for everyone in attendance and the response to this event and this story. A big part of this came about because of the tireless efforts of a couple individuals on District 9 that are election integrity focused. I would say out of all the 13 districts in the great state of Michigan, we have some of the strongest election integrity hawks out there. So, you know, it's you ever hear the saying like, learn from the best, right? We want to learn from the best, find people that have what we want, do what they do, will have what they have. This is an opportunity for all of you to pull out your phones and click the little QR code here to sign up and get involved in election integrity. That's what this whole meeting is about. So we're going to start off real quick before we jump into it with a prayer. We're going to have that prayer led by Dan Bowe.
It's not every day a Christian under construction can do this. Please stand. Father God, we gather in your name, your path of light, your grace. Strengthen us in our unity. It's really needed. We can disagree. We can not even like each other. But we're on a mission. It's one team, one fight.
Yes.
That's what Father God will tell you. That's what he's telling me. Strengthen us, bind the evil, wherever it may be, that interferes with what we're trying to do, all the good we're trying to do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Dan. And now we're gonna jump right into the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Born and unborn.
I put my readers on. I can't see anything. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into it. Again, if you didn't have time, this QR code will be coming up throughout the presentation. I encourage everyone to click on that or visit the website as listed on how to get plugged in after you learn what you learned today. So jumping right in, we're here for the voter registration fraud, right? The Muskegon GBI strategy story, featuring Phil O'Halloran, Lori Skibo, and Braden Jacobazi. I love that name.
Jacobazi.
So it says 2020 on there, because this transpired in 2020, prior to the stolen election from Big Daddy that we all saw down at TCF. So this all happened prior to even our votes. Oh, I got it back up here. We got a video here that we're going to show real quick. Go ahead, Scott.
And one of the things that I find most interesting before we get into the concerns of election fraud, I have a question. At the police raid at the GBI Strategies offices, but let's put a little context. GBI Strategies, who is supposedly a voter registration organization, has received millions from the Democrat Party. They received almost $500,000 from Joe Biden himself. And now this organization, who was under investigation for potentially fraudulent voter registration, but at a police raid, they find semi-automatic weapons with suppressors. Who were they planning to shoot? Who were they prepared to shoot? What were they defending? And I find it hypocritical that the Democrat Party has a position that American citizens shouldn't have semi-automatic weapons, but yet an organization that Joe Biden and the Democrat Party helps to fund has an office with semi-automatic weapons, custom pistols with suppressors. Again, who were they about to shoot? Who were they prepared to shoot? What were they protecting? That seems like a lot of firepower for an organization that was tasked with simply registering people to vote. And then I also find it interesting that it was reported today, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that the cities where GBI Strategies were operating had significant spikes in voter registrations. And then in the Muskegon investigation, where the investigation in Muskegon County, where there were 8,000 to 10,000 voter registration forms dropped off at one municipality, where many are registered. If you look at this all together, it's very concerning. Our voting rights are necessary for our freedom. Our voting rights comprise of 3 elements: ballot access, ballot security, and preventing illegal ballots from nullifying legal votes. Our voting rights are not just ballot access. There are multiple aspects to our voting rights. And the constant questions surrounding our election system is an absolute threat to our republic. Our election system is the only way that we, the people, maintain control over our government. This is not a partisan issue. I mean, Joe Biden admitted himself in the video they had the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics. I think that should concern people, considering that he was sending almost $500,000 to an organization who is being currently investigated by the FBI for voter registration fraud, for GBI Strategies. What were these people up to? Is the ability to have our voices heard when we vote. This should not be a partisan concern. This is an American issue. It's a fundamental issue of our liberty.
That'll do it.
Okay. Well, listen, I don't need that until he gets that figured out to talk to you guys about what that means. So, what we're trying to do right now is take you back to 2020. Okay? And what was going on in 2020. Think about who was in leadership in 2020. Think about who was in House of Representatives in 2020. Think about who the senators were in 2020. Think about all the things that we saw with our own eyes. I just want everyone to go back to 2020. And I know it's been 3 years. We're far from where that is, but that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take you back. And one of the things I want to juxtaposition is, did you see that kind of fire? Did you see that kind of speech from anybody from the GOP in 2020?
No.
Right? And I can't stress this enough. You still don't see it from your representatives. Right? Not much has changed with all that we've been through. I mean, they're arresting people, right? They're arresting people. So let's go from 2020, where nothing has changed, to what we're seeing today. It's I think that we're blessed to have the leadership that we have, and I'm proud that we're all in this room because we're part of that. So this is what I want to do. I want to take you back to 2020 to remember what it felt like.
Start with the virus, imported into America. Talk about it nonstop. Call some governors. Not them. That's your guys. Put patients into nursing homes. Kill thousands. Blame the president. Keep blaming. Blame some more. Lock down small business. Kill the economy. Push mail-in voting. Stoke a race war. Call for riots. Pick a candidate. No, not her. Yeah, that's more like it. Lock him in his basement. Shield him from the press. Don't cover this. Don't cover this. Don't cover this. Keep doing that. Ignore the economic recovery. Downplay the world peace. Pump the pause. Pump. Don't stop pumping. Install your software in swing states. That was fast. Take control of polling stations. Call off the election when you're losing. Kick everyone out. Pull out all the extra ballots. Get the software to do its thing. Get people to say it's over. Call the big tech guys. Ban anyone who notices. Act like the whole thing never happened. Stealing the most powerful republic in the world. It's that easy.
I get a stomachache when I watch that now. You know what I mean? I remember watching when it first came out and like being in the middle of that. But like, you know, years have passed since then. And, you know, with that in mind, what we're trying to do is say, you know, there's these individuals right here all kind of started their journey together around that time frame, right? And I'm going to let each one of them kind of give a real brief introduction to themselves, and I'll get away because nobody wants to talk to me. And the stars are up here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil first.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, so Phil O'Halloran here. Nice to meet you guys. I know a lot of you actually because I love coming to Macomb. It's a great place, and pretty much one of the hotbeds in the state of election integrity and election security. And the people in Macomb did not give up on the 2020 election. Now, everybody else did, it seems like, but the highest concentration of people who just said, we got to fix the 2020 before we move forward. And part of fixing the 2020 is really just, it involves identifying and admitting. People need citizens to admit that it was a rigged election, okay? So like Warren said at the beginning, it was people like us three and a whole host of other people, probably some here in this room, who were down at the TCF Center. So we just kind of were like a dog with a bone. I was just thinking of another friend of ours, Bob Cushman, who just came out with a great report in the Gateway Pundit a couple of days ago. And he was another one of these guys from the TCF Center. So we left that place November 4th or 5th, in some cases, 2020. We left feeling like we've been ambushed. I felt, you felt like you were kind of violated, like you were just a mug, And so that a lot of us just never let go, and we've been fighting ever since. So that's where we're at right now. And the one of the key things here is that it's a team effort. Okay, so it's teamwork. It's all about teamwork. And it's about the reason we got to this place is because the citizens just they figured it's on autopilot. Our country's on autopilot. All we got to do is sit back and entertain ourselves, go to barbecues, have fun, occasionally vote like every 4 years, forget the primaries, we don't need that, and just kind of do our thing and have fun, raise our family, and we trust all these nameless, faceless people to run the place. Well, we ended up being wrong when we made that decision a long time ago. So now it's caught up to us. So what do? We got to get active, got to get involved. It's we the people, it's a republic. If you can keep it, that's what Benjamin Franklin said. And maybe we can't keep it. That's what we're figuring out here. So we're going to know if we can keep it or not. So the key thing is people, regular citizens, stepping up to the plate and doing their job, okay, as citizens, acting like a real citizen that cares about things. So luckily, back in on October the 29th or the 31st, somewhere in there, one of those citizens I'm talking about paid attention, and he had already been studying this stuff extensively, so he knew about registrations, and he knew that it wasn't just ballots going into drop boxes or anything, It was registrations were important. So he saw a story in Muskegon, the town where he was actually a candidate himself, and he read it and he said, "I don't buy this." You know, something about the story didn't ring true to him. So he ultimately ended up putting that story aside and saying, "I got to go back to this." And then a few days later, November 3rd. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that's right. So I'm not quite there yet. Okay. So we're giving the build up to this guy. So basically, and then I'll show you this picture. Okay, so the key thing is that this individual knew that something was wrong. He had a gut feeling, and it took him a little while to catch up with it because there's so many other things going on after the November election took place. And then he had a friend. I told you it's teamwork, right? Well, he had a friend who kept badgering him all the time. Another election patriot, also on the west side. He was from Grand Rapids. So this guy kept saying, "Hey, you gotta follow up on that story that you had, you know, in your town." So ultimately, the first guy did follow up on the story, and he went to a Michigan State Police lieutenant who actually investigated the story that he saw in this little blip in the news. A very tiny blip. It looked like nothing to see here. Move on. Everything's fine. A couple of irregularities. That's it. Don't worry about a thing, right? And he went to this guy and he found out there was a lot to worry about, and there was a heck of a lot to worry about. And he managed to get the incident number from the lieutenant of the Michigan State Police on the west side, Rockford Post actually. And so at that point, somewhere, let's say fast forward about 2 years, he ends up getting another couple of more prods from his buddy, and finally the buddy actually puts in a Freedom of Information Act public records request, and then several months later, that ends up coming up. So first of all, I just wanted to tell you that this individual here. Let me just show you him right here. His name, and this is the guy. His name is Chris Kyala, and Chris is. So big round of applause for Chris. There he is, right there. Happens to be with us today. That's it. So what happened with Chris was then after his friend, who could not be with us tonight, he was invited, we hoped he could be here, but he wasn't able to make it. His name is Keith Hinkle. So, and I've known both these guys for a little while, you know, probably like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. So basically, when Keith got a hold of the FOIA, the next thing, you know, he started trying to see if he could get some people interested in it. And ultimately, he ends up at a state committee meeting that I was at, and I'm the chair of the election integrity committee, so I was at the meeting. And so he came up to me, and I said, "Hey, how you doing, Keith? Good to see you." And so we got together, and then he told me, he said, "Have you heard about this GBI strategies thing?" And I said, "Boy, that sounds familiar, but it sounds familiar, but I don't know what that is." So. Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide here. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, so this is just a earlier thing about the.
That's the story.
Yeah, that was the original. That's just the story that showed up in a blip, and Chris saw that, and that's what got him suspicious. You know. Okay, and then now here we go. This is where it gets interesting. So ultimately, then he sent me the police report about 6 weeks later. He faxed me the police report, or he emailed it. I think he emailed it. And so that's when we got on the trail. We started doing research. I got Lori Skibo involved. Later on, Braden Jacobazzi came on board on our team. And so we've been searching it ever since. And then we got a hold of the Gateway Pundit. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit here. Now I'm going to hand over to Lori here. And, oh, I see. Okay, that's right. Okay, so I'll go ahead and talk to these. So 1028, we've got the Muskegon Clerk's Office received voter registration forms. So these were dropped off by an individual whose name was not redacted throughout the entire report. So there was a couple of spots where the name wasn't redacted, so we were able to identify this individual. We'll keep her nameless for the moment, just because it hasn't been, nothing's happened with this case. So the next thing that happened was when she dropped off these registration applications, the folks that were behind the desk there at the clerk's office, they identified just a huge number of registration forms. So for one person to drop off thousands of registration forms was really kind the antennas went up. So at that point, they decided to look into this further. They started noticing that the forms, one string of forms, they all look like they're done in the same handwriting. So in one sample, out of 42, there was 26 all in the same handwriting. So if that doesn't get you spooked, make your antennas go up, nothing will. So they also noticed that a lot of the addresses didn't exist. So they look at the address, and 325 Mockingbird Lane, okay, where is that? And they looked it up. It does not exist in that municipality. So at that point, they were definitely concerned. And then a few days later, they called the police, the Muskegon police firm. They jumped in, did a tremendous job of investigating like they should. They did their jobs, and there's nothing, you can't say a bad thing about the Muskegon police. After they identified the fact that it was not that this company called GBI Strategies, which was actually doing the registration, collections and dropping off, and they found out that there were a total of 7 cities in Michigan. So some of the other cities, Detroit, Lansing, Southfield, Ypsilanti, Flint, Grand Haven, South Haven, there's others, so and also there's a connection in Alfred Hills. So when they determined that these registration forms potentially could have been, there could be a lot more of them throughout Michigan. So then at that point they called in the Michigan, well, they called the Attorney General's office, and they got Inspector, a guy by the name of Tom Davis. He then got a hold of the Michigan State Police, and then the Michigan State Police, Mike Alexander, got on the case, and they began this entire investigation, which continued for a long time. Ultimately, it went on to the FBI. We're going to go more towards the center. So it went on to the FBI, and they did virtually nothing, as far as we know. I mean, if they did something, they're not telling us. But they showed up for one meeting with the state police individuals. Okay, so here we are. The police know the irregularities. Michigan State Police search warrants were issued. Now, this is really an important point here. But when the search warrants were issued, they put in 4 of the warrants with a specific violation of Michigan election law in mind. Okay, it was written in there. It's MCL 168.933A. Okay, so what is that? That says that what it says is that it's illegal to commit election fraud by forgery. Forgery being the key word. Now, you've heard forgery recently. Okay, so we have 16 electors, and one of them is standing right here in this room. Cliff, are you there? Yeah, Cliff. Everybody knows Cliff Ross, and everybody should go into his legal defense fund. Now, Cliff is fast forward 3 years after this investigation, which was into actual registration application forgeries. That's the crime that they were investigating. And we're going to find out how are the 2 different ways that our Attorney General treated this an investigation where the officers actually were looking for real forgeries. We're going to compare that to 3 years later in this case of Cliff Ross and 15 other innocent electors, where fake forgery is what they're up against. Charges of fake forgery. So so the search warrant was signed, looking for registration forgery. They executed 3 search warrants. One was in Southfield, one was in Grand Haven. I think that was the first one, and then one was in Muskegon itself. Yeah, Muskegon. So the most interesting one was the Southfield. So the Southfield search warrant, when they executed, they found some really interesting stuff. In addition to, some half-finished or half-completed registration forms and some other, just clerical items that you would expect from this type of endeavor. They also found AR-15s that were equipped with these with suppressors, which in common parlance that's like silencers. And they were also equipped with optics, like sort of scopes and that. They also had custom pistols, and these were put into these Pelican cases that We later found out from a different police report that the employees were unwittingly traveling around town with rented cars with these Pelican cases in them. They were wondering later, like, I wonder if we had weapons there. We didn't even know that we were, ferrying weapons around town and around the state. So all this stuff came out at the Southfield Michigan raid. After they identified that there was a real problem, then they started to look more. They were also at the same time they were tailing people. They were looking up. They were going to the phone company and getting cell phone records, and they were actually staking out hotels where they were staying in Muskegon and other places in South Florida. So it was a major operation that was done correctly by the Muskegon police and by the Michigan State Police. So they were doing exactly what they're supposed to do. The problem was higher. So somewhere along the line, maybe it probably had nothing to do with the fact that there was a huge November 3rd election a few days later, but somewhere along the line, things got sort of squashed and it was not advanced. Nobody else found out about it. You didn't, did you know about it? So I thought it was smooth like that. Yeah, us guys, we were eating, sleeping, drinking election all the time. Luckily, an alert citizen, Chris Kyle, did hear about it because he was in Muskegon where it was all happening. So, and he was paying attention to his local, to everything that was going on there. So I want to move on. Let me see certain things on this slide. There's a lot of great business. Now, so this is when the nation wakes up to Muskegon. So I want you to hand over here and let's have Greg Jack Buzz.
Okay, well, so there was a big story that we viral over the last day or so, and it actually goes back to 2020. It's Michigan stuff, obviously one of the states that was heavily contested in the 2020 election. And it's specifically this police report out of Muskegon County. I don't know if I mispronounced that, but I think it's Muskegon. Muskegon County in Michigan. It's the western part of Michigan near Grand Rapids. And it's this police report where a county official calls the police and says, hey, we're getting all of these ballot applications dropped off. I believe it's that you would send out a ballot application, send it in, and then they would mail you the ballot because they were doing all mail ballots. And one person is dropping off thousands of these, about 10,000 total they estimated. And Muskegon County's only got 175,000 people. So if you account for whose kids and everything, it's like 1 out of every 13 voters in Muskegon County had this ballot application dropped off by one person. And they're like, we're looking at them, and a lot of them seem really, really similar. And so the cops go in and investigate. They take a set of 40 of them. It's not clear from the police report whether this is all the ones that were suspicious or if they just sort of took some examples to then look into it further. And they start looking at them. Like, okay, well, one, a lot of these seem to have made up addresses that are not real addresses. Some of them have the same signature and it doesn't match what's already on file. Because again, these are ballot applications. So they often already had signatures on file for their voter registrations and such, and now they're different. And they start exploring this more and more, and they find one of the people whose name is here. She says, yeah, I filled out this form, but I didn't sign it. I don't know who signed it or how it ever got to you. And they just find all these red flags. And then they go to the actual place of business where this is held. It's GBI Strategies, I think is the name of the firm. And GBI Strategies, they investigate their place, and they just find more strange things. They find more ballot applications half finished. They find 8 firearms in Pelican boxes, a mixture of semi-automatic rifles and custom pistols with suppressors, like it's a James Bond movie or something. And they were apparently legally owned guns, so I'm glad they're not doing illegal gun trafficking to our knowledge, but they had these guns, and somewhere on a whiteboard, they had in a phrase, and they didn't know what the purpose of this was, but someone wrote on a whiteboard, like, major topics, weapons in the field. You know, maybe they meant, like, we need to be weapons in the field because we're going to go win the election for Brandon. They weren't calling Brandon yet, but... So yeah, they were from the future. And so it's just all these strange things. And they were like, wow, this is pretty weird. We better tell the Secretary of State about it. The Secretary of State's Democrat. Or we can tell the FBI about it. The FBI are Democrats. And so that's kind of just, that's where it went. That's kind of how it ended. And so obviously the big picture thing is Muskegon County by itself did not swing Michigan, but this company was active nationwide in a lot of different places. They got, it looks like, many millions of dollars from the Democrats. They were elsewhere in Michigan. They were in other states. And if the fate of this investigation was, we found all this weird stuff, and then we just decided collectively we're not going to look at it anymore. How often did that happen in the incredibly fair election that was 2020?
So you weren't thrilled with the article, though.
I wasn't thrilled with the article because, let me bring up the headline here. What we've got is,
I like Gateway Pundit, for the record.
I
think they're great.
So,
I do. I like Jim Hoff. I've known him for a while. They play a very important role in this. I'm on the record saying that. I like Gateway Pundit.
so what Gateway Pundit does,
Speak more highly of Gateway Pundit, their role. The fact that Gateway Pundit, by the way, was there. Even I want to say they even got started before Breitbart.com got. No, they're great, and they never give up. They are relentless. I like Gateway Pundit. I really do.
my issue with Gateway Pundit is, one, I think many of the stories they publish are just not true, and I think in the grand scheme of things,
Not true.
some of them aren't true.
We tried, Charlie. We tried.
That's how it is.
The essence of it is true. They put how do I best say this? They dress up the story in a way that makes you want to read it. There are 5 readers over there. Is that what it is?
All right. So, so now enter Act 2. So now we've talked about 2020 and all the things that these police officers did, that Chris did, and now we want to get into what's going on more recently. So a lot of people don't even realize this, but Dana Nessel, she doesn't have a problem prosecuting when it suits her, or selectively. In the previous election here, you guys realized that there were some ballot signatures that got signed fraudulently, right? And a lot of candidates were removed from the running in the last election because of it.
That's right.
And it's almost, I'm not going to say it's planned, but she had no problem addressing that issue, and she'll talk about it right here. And she did it very swiftly. And here we are 3 years later, trying to deal with this issue, which is much bigger. And we don't even know about it until recently. So I want to show you how powerful Dana Nessel can be when she chooses.
Today, as you already know, today we are announcing charges filed pursuant to our investigation into fraudulent signature petitions filed for 9 campaigns here in Michigan during the 2022 election cycle in the state of Michigan. During the 2022 election cycle, the bar was set at 15,000 valid signatures in order to qualify for the ballot for a statewide office. And there was a recent reduction from the previous threshold, which had been 30,000. You might remember the Chris Bradley case from the 2018 election. So to this end, most campaigns will seek and contract with vendors, business entities that serve as experts on signature collection and validation to fulfill this essential function. And these business entities take on the work for large sums of money paid by campaigns, because it's hard to do. It requires large operation and oversight, and a niche and specialized expertise is needed to assure that the signatures are valid and numerous enough to satisfy the ballot eligibility requirements. When those who operate these businesses pervert the process and commit outright fraud and forgery, and in doing so, swindle their clients out of tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, these bad actors must be held accountable, and the criminal penalties should be significant. So what we're here to announce is that under arrest and arrested yesterday are Sean Wilma and Jamie Wilma Gooden, who were arrested yesterday. They will be arraigned before the 37th District Court today at 1 p.m. The third defendant, Willie Reed, has not yet been taken into custody. The U.S. Marshals are here looking for him. strongly suggest to Mr. Reed that he turn himself in as quickly as possible. And I will say this, it will likely affect the conditions of his bond if he does not turn himself in. I assume with all the publicity on this, he knows at this point it's a warning. Now, the charges allege that Sean Wilmot and Jamie Wilmot Gooden, and also Willie Reed, as part of a criminal conspiracy. They will each face 8 counts of false pretenses, 8 counts of use of a computer to commit a crime, 8 counts of election law fraud, and 1 count of conducting a criminal enterprise. Sean Wilmot and Willie Reed will each additionally face 1 count of larceny by conversion and another count of using a computer to commit a crime. Sean Wilmot also will be charged as a habitual offender, a habitual third.
So, in her own words, Dana Nessel. Oh, in her own words, Dana Nessel very clearly understands the gravity of forgery during election. He very clearly lays out how serious this is and what the punishments are. For 2 probably pawns in this whole thing, right? 2 people who screwed over several candidates, right? How many of those bad signatures do you guys think they got? About 8,000. How many fraudulent or suspected fraudulent voter registration applications do you think were found in Muskegon? About 8 to 12,000. And somehow that's not important at all. And this would affect a lot of people in this election, right? And Dana Nessel isn't telling you about it. She's hiding it. Speaking of suppressors, Dana Nessel.
She's a Vicky.
Make this point too, just put some context around that. At the very beginning, when we showed the Christina Caramo press conference, we were in Lansing headquarters at the Michigan Republican Party. We were there with at least 15 to 20 reporters that were in the room, and we went through the report. And you know, the press had the questions. They want to know where we're going to convention. Big, right? What? They wanted to know about Matt DePerno. You know, typical deflect anything that they could to steer away. Yeah, to steer away from the story. And I finally interjected myself and I said, you know, there are real victims in this story. I don't know if those victims were Republicans or Democrats. I don't care. But you are totally avoiding the real victims that are in the story. And you know who Dana Nessel turns around and blames? She blames the employees of GBI Strategies. That's where you're at. If he's going to blame them. Craig Maurer of the Detroit Free Press, he thought this story was so important that when he went back to report on it, he took a picture of the books that are on the bookshelf at the Michigan GOP headquarters. And that was what he reported on.
Very well said. Yeah, the reporters at the press conference were very disinterested in all of this, and they were very dismissive of all of this, right? People have this idea that they can just go along to get along and that everything's fine and that the system will just handle itself if they just let it go. So, unfortunately, that's how we ended up here today. And Dana Nessel knows what she's doing. She knows that there's a problem here, and she knows that she's covered it up. She knows. So I'm just going to go over some of the timeline here that we've already started discussing. And I want to make sure that we focus on a man named Keith Hinkle, who helped Chris get the FOIAs for this. They're kind of buddies, right? And back and forth. There's so much election fraud. There's so many details going on. There's elections going on, and all this stuff kind of gets lost. And it's just the fact that this team effort of people and friends who care about this stuff. Oh yeah, that's right. Remember that thing a year ago? You know, among the other 1,000 things a year ago. Let's look at this thing. So I just want to make sure that we give him a shout out as well, not just Chris. So, well, a lot of, he mentions it to, Chris mentions this to, or Pete mentions this to Phil at a state committee meeting, and that's when the three of us all started getting involved around them this summer, this spring, right? And that's why we are lucky enough to have this platform now, because of a lady named Christina Caramo, who is the chair of the MIGOP, who will allow us now, because in the past we haven't had this, right? This could have been suppressed again, even though Chris found it. So, I want to thank Christina Caramo. Finally, a chair that will address these issues. So this is Keith Hinkle. We just wanted to make sure that we give him a shout out. We filed the first FOIA, is that correct? Yeah, and that FOIA has led to many more FOIAs now, which we'll go into one of those as well down the line here. So since then, the MIGOP has been involved, and we've been FOIAing things. I've been FOIAing things. We've been writing stories with Patty McMurray, with Jim Hoff at the Gateway Pundit, who I agree with Charlie Kirk is awesome.
Me too.
From there, we FOIA'd the actual Michigan City police officers, and we got their 40-page report, which nobody had gotten yet. Right? I mean, even when you know there's an issue, there's so many avenues to explore, and you don't explore the right one. And then from that report, we've gotten some very good details. I can't all to tell you yet because there's so many little webs that we're going down. There's so many little avenues that we're going down from there. And we think it's going to get bigger and bigger and snowball. But one of the things we want you guys to do is let people know about this story so that you can go to whistleblower at migop.org, whistleblower at migop.org, because what this does, guys, by having this national story and people realizing that we have the guns, we've got the burner phones, we've got the fraudulent registrations, and we have it in the police's own words. It's not just some guy that came from TCF Center that nobody knows. These are official police reports talking about this stuff now. So you don't have to say your buddy Braden said this, or Phil said this, or Lori said this. You can say, look at the darn report from the police. Do you not trust your own police department? So let's give a shout out to the Muskegon City Police. Actually did their job. I know several police officers. They're great police officers. But when I try and, for the last 3 years, and I'm sure you guys do too, when you try and tell them stuff like this, they say, oh, I don't know election law. I can't deal with this. This will probably go to the state police. And then when you talk to a state police, they'll say, well, this will probably end up in federal no matter what because this is an election. So I don't want to deal with this. Because they have limited manpower, the amount of time, they need a prosecutor, they need a sheriff, they need everybody to get on board. And so then it just goes up the chain and it gets lost at the FBI where it is right now. So what we need are more good clerks like Ann Meich and Kimberly Young from Muskegon who actually did their job. To their credit, they are heroes for actually taking this. There are so many clerks around this state and around the country who don't do that stuff. They get the nasty grams from the Secretary of State, from Dave Nessel, and then they assume that that's the truth and that they shouldn't report on this and that we're the bad guys. Right? Not true. These guys did the right thing before everybody started getting suppressed. And we need more people like that. And this is the ammunition for them. Right? Now let's make it cool again to actually speak out about crimes. Right? That's what we can do. These timelines, we have so many stories. The last I counted on the Gateway Pundit, just starting with Chris's story, Lori's work on this, all of her working with the FEC data and all these other things that we're doing in the background, all the tedium and the really important stuff that you need to do to get down to that, drill down to one more name or one more dollar, right? From all that, we've probably got about 50 stories now of all different things that all stem from this one thing. And there's going to be 50 more, guys. If we can get more people to go to whistleblower at migop.org, or for the clerks to come forward, and it can be anonymous. You can come out in public if you want credit. We'll give it to you. If you want to stay silent, that's totally fine. We need those too, because we need people to keep working and doing their job. So we need people to speak out, and we hope this will give them the ammunition. So we have more stories come out. So here you can see that 8/11, Dana Nessel is still trying to cover it up. But she said, yeah, we had 8 to 10,000 suspected fraudulent ballots, but is she making a big stink about it? Is there any press conference talking about how she's going to prosecute these people and how strong she is as an attorney general? I don't hear it. So I just want you guys to understand that. And here we go. The story is so big, we're actually making national traction. It's not just Charlie Kirk. It's not just Jim Hoff. We're on Bannon now. I think this has been on Fox News. I think this has been all over. I'm not saying that they care, but at least it made the headline. We're at least breaking through now a little bit, right? And you can't hide guns and suppressors the way you can. Oh, well, they were registrations, but you know, what if they didn't actually get in? You know, they were just there. It's no big deal. Just paperwork, you know. So here we go. Steve Bannon.
So GBI Strategies drops off 8 to 10. This is on a police report. Drops off 8 to 10,000 voter registrations in October of 2020 before the election. I guess it's still time in Michigan by state law to get registered. The registrar is concerned enough, calls the police. The police goes and investigates. They go to this place and they got like a boiler room. They've got weapons, silencers, cash, the money cards. And it looks like they got a production facility to produce, wait for it, voter registrations that maybe are not filled out and done by American citizens who are eligible to vote, who want to make sure they're eligible in that area. And there's a police report done. The last time I looked,
everybody here?
Right, October of 2020 is, we're coming up on the 3rd-year anniversary of it within 100 days. So what's been done? What was done by the Secretary of State? What was done by authorities?
Well, they turned, as we said, as I said, they started an investigation with state police. Jocelyn Benson's office was in on this, and then they turned it over to the FBI. And you know what happened, Steve? This will shock you, but it died. The investigation died. They didn't do anything. Once again, the FBI was involved in election interference. They have done nothing with this, just like Hunter's laptop that goes to the FBI and disappears. So this is just another instance that shows that our FBI is against the people of this country, and they're participating in stealing the elections. I think we found the culprits here.
So let me ask you, how do we know? It just because charges haven't been brought, you surmise that the FBI is not involved, or you guys have further reporting that show that the FBI did not pursue this?
It is mentioned in the report that it was turned over to the FBI. That there's been some updates listed on the report. Patty was looking over these items, but the last update was, I believe, in 2022, and it says that it's still being investigated. So you know what that means, Steve. Nothing's being done.
Yeah. Patty McMurray, walk us through your assessment of the situation. Like, who's GD Strategies? How did this all come about? And why is criminal charges not been brought on this?
So thanks for having me. The first point I wanted to make is that Phil O'Halloran, who is in charge of the election integrity unit for the Michigan GOP, brought this report to our attention. This is a police report that was FOIA'd after a citizen discovered that this case was being investigated years ago, and he FOIA'd the police report, and he got the police report, and the police report's pretty heavily redacted. But the interesting thing is that the name of the person, this is a single woman too. I want to make sure that we make that clear. Anne Maish, I'm not sure of the how you pronounce her name, but she's the city clerk in Muskegon, and she first received between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration application forms from this individual, one woman, and that's when she alerted the Muskegon police. The Muskegon Police Department then must have alerted the Attorney General's office. Dana Nessel, our lawless Michigan Attorney General, she then asked the Michigan State Police to become involved in the investigation. And that's kind of where the report starts, because this is the Michigan State Police report. And as you can see, it's pretty heavily redacted. So what they did do, though, what's interesting is in a couple different places in the report, they accidentally, I'm not sure, they left out the name of the woman who dropped off between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration applications. And in the report, the Muskegon city clerk mentioned that this woman brought an additional 2,500 voter applications, but I think it was the following day. And that's when the police started following her. Another interesting point is the police began tracking these individuals that they thought were involved in this ring of voter registration fraud in Michigan. And they were using the same technology, the GPS tracking that the vote used, that Democrats and the media mocked as being inaccurate and unreliable. So I think that's important to know because throughout the report, they talk about the GPS tracking that they used. They started Muskegon with the report. They were able to identify that an organization was working out of a California eyewear company building that had been vacated. So it was a vacant building, but it was formerly a California eyewear building, and I think it still had the signage up front. So it was very discreet. They started the investigation in Muskegon. The investigation led them to multiple cities across the state of Michigan, including Flint, I think Grand Rapids, Ypsilanti, Southfield. Southfield is where they found the cache of weapons, including semi-automatic weapons and other guns in this facility, where they found bags of prepaid voting cards. They identified at least one burner phone in the report. They talked about all the iPads that were being used by the individuals that were hired. Now, GBI strategies is unredacted in the report, which is interesting. They're unredacted twice. And the report that we have is, I think, 58 pages long. But throughout the report, they are redacted. So I'm not sure why they were left for us to see in the report twice. So we were able to find GBI strategies. And I also mentioned the owner of GBI strategies in the report, Gary Bell. We were able to determine that I think he's in Tennessee. But what he was doing is he was using outside organizations to hire these workers who were canvassing and bringing in these registrations. I think what's really important to also note is that recently our lawless Attorney General Dana Nessel announced 8 felony charges against 16 electors in Michigan, which she claims cast fake electoral votes, which is completely inaccurate. They cast an alternate set of electoral votes, and they did it because the investigations were not complete in Michigan, and there was so many ongoing investigations and lawsuits being filed that they weren't comfortable with the outcome of the election, and so therefore they cast the alternate set of electoral votes. So recently, Dana Nessel came out and made a statement and talked about in a fake press conference why she was pressing charges, 8 felony charges on these 16 individuals, 15 of which are senior citizens. And many of these charges carry up to 14 years in prison, each charge. But she announced the reason that these electors knew that there was no evidence of mass voter fraud in Michigan. So it's interesting that Dana Nessel's criminal investigators, were working on this report, and they were also working with our crooked Secretary of State, Johnson Benson, with her office to look at the registrations. So I think it's also important to note that once these registrations are accepted, these applications, these names and fake addresses or fake identifications stay in our voter rolls until somebody identifies them. So, they could be used again in future elections. So, and this is just one individual that turned in between 8 and 10,000 applications in one day. So you can only imagine the size and scope of this investigation. Identify this report, it could have been even more. And I think it was in I'm just going to look at the report. It looks like somewhere around May 28, 2021, they announced that the Michigan State Police announced that the case would remain open, even though the FBI had taken over the case, because they believed that there was a multi-state operation taking place with GBI strategies and other outside organizations. So those are just to kind of, give a little bit of background on what we're seeing in the report here.
Patty, here's the question: is that you've got the Republican Party, but some of these locales are local prosecutors are Republicans. Why has there been? I understand it's up to the state police. You got Benson. You've got now it's the FBI. You get Chris Ray. They're all bearing it, or it's going to be open. I can't talk about it because it's under investigation years after the fact. Why have no gotten on top of this that could actually charge this in their locale with anything that happened, and then you could use that to interconnect and get to the entire state of Michigan, and then get back to the multi-state aspect of it, man.
I think that's an excellent question. I mean, we had a Republican-led Senate and House in Michigan, and the Republican Senate that investigated election fraud in Michigan released a report that I think everybody in the country knows about it, stating that there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud in the state of Michigan. They released that report at the same time that Jocelyn Benson's office and Dana Ness's office were involved in this investigation of widespread voter fraud across the state of Michigan. And instead of saying, oh, wait, hold up, no, we've got to make an investigation here, they allowed the report to stand, and they actually praised them for their statement.
Yes, they did.
Okay, but also the House and the Senate there had direct access to the state police.
All right, guys. So what Patty is getting at, what isn't actually mentioned in there, and what we started into that earlier with the population of Muskegon, the certified voting age population, the number of people that are allowed to vote in Muskegon, I think it's about 28,000, right? So you're talking about a third of the voting age population being brought in one day by one person. And the police, not us, the police themselves and the clerk identified about 42 fraudulent voter registration applications out of the ones they looked at. So, what's that?
Out of that voting age population of 28, almost all of them were already registered to vote. It was just shy, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I think it was right at 26 something, 27. So you were talking about, a difference of 1,000 potential to get to 100%.
So that's just the city of Muskegon. So what you also see in this report, when you read the actual reports from the police, this isn't me saying this. This is the testimony of the workers that they interviewed for GBI. Is that this is kind of like it seems like a fly-by-night operation where they hire people for a few weeks before the election, and then it just kind of disappears. And it seems like GBI exists in multiple states all around the country, and it's all coordinated in some way, and so they're all connected, and it's very hard to find these places. And I don't want to give away any information, but there's some in other states that we're looking into, and they don't even exist anymore, so it makes it very difficult to find the information, but we are, about some of the other police investigations in other states. So I want to mention that. I also want to mention that some of the testimony that some of these people give to the police officers in the report. So they interview some of these people, we don't give their names, but they mention that the cops mentioned that they noticed paraphernalia on there trying to convince these people to promote Joe Biden. So not only are they getting registrants, but they also just happen to have these pamphlets on all across the table or whatever it is, and it said trying to convince people to vote for Joe Biden, which is also illegal, I believe, right? And then when they ask them about it, they say, "Oh no, we're very neutral. Don't worry, we're very neutral." Also, when they talk to these people, they say, "Oh no, we're not paid by the number of signatures that we get." But then they start off by saying, "Well, yes, we are paid by the number of signatures we get." So they're incentivized to get as many as they can, which would incentivize fraud, right? If you're not just paid by the hour. And you see in the report that these people start flip-flopping, and the police note that they are getting more and more nervous when they're talking. So these are things to consider, guys. And one of the last things I want to say before I move on here is that McBroom. I know, that was an easy move. I know, that was so easy. So, emotional response. McBroom just came out, and he heard about this report as well. And his response was basically the same as any Democrat or, Dana Nessel. They found these voter registration applications, but did they really find any fraud, any real fraud? Well, you guys be the judge. Okay, so that's your Republican legislature leadership, and you guys have to pressure them now that you have the data, right? Now that you can go to a police report, you don't have to go to Phil, you don't have to go to Lori, you don't have to go to Chris, you don't have to go to me. You can go to the police report and you can say, you guys got to investigate this. There's no reason not to, especially when Dana Netzel will prosecute 16 electors, which seems like all that the journalists wanted to talk about the other day, right? They'll prosecute them in a heartbeat, right? But they won't go after legitimate crimes that the police have already investigated.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add something to what Braden was, he was pointing out about the Nessel investigation. And a lot of people they just get discouraged. They think, well, this is, they're always going to be corrupt like that. Well, they're not always corrupt. Okay, so in Indiana, something very similar to this happened in 2016. So we dug into this in detail, and there were 57 counties in Indiana who had a major Indiana State Police investigation in 2016 before the major election that elected Trump. And they looked into registration fraud, just like this. It was another one of these hardcore, radical Democrat operations. You know? And so what they found was that they got enough evidence to actually convict 12 people. So but what's interesting about this case in Indiana, 2016, is that it was a completely different response by the Attorney General and the Secretary of State. So what they did, unlike Dana Nessel, they actually did their jobs. So from top to bottom, the police, the Indiana State Police, and the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, they all did their jobs. The governor too. What they did was the first thing they did was they alerted the public. They said there is a major investigation going on here. And they kept growing from like, I remember headlines, 9 counties, 22 counties now, 57 counties that are being investigated for this, right? So it was a dragnet all across the state of Indiana because they took election fraud seriously. They took forgery of registration forms seriously. And they alerted the public in the media. They told people, be on the lookout for registration fraud. Don't let your voter identity be taken. They had hotlines, phone hotlines. Don't let somebody steal your voter identity. Because like Lori said, there's victims involved here. People who are already registered, and they're registered voters. Whether they vote or not, they're registered in the system. And then these individuals, allegedly in Muskegon, they come in with, somebody who comes in with a fake name and a fake address and everything else. They can steal a pre-existing real person. So the Indiana folks, the authorities there, did the right thing. They told everybody that this is unacceptable. They were doing everything they could, and they alerted the voters. And most importantly, they alerted the clerks. Okay, so the clerks, knowing that there's this problem all over the state, they can immediately swoop in, examine their registrations, talk to their employees and say, did anybody come in here with large packages? Did you receive packages in the mail? In fact, in Muskegon, packages with very large amounts of these applications. We're talking bundles of hundreds or even thousands in some cases. The Gateway Pundit, in their incredible investigation, just literally like last Saturday, added to the story here, where they said they actually got screenshots from social media, private Facebook or other social media channels, where Michigan clerks were talking to each other. These are like, clerk buddies on their own chat, private chat. And they were sharing their amazement and horror that they were getting these fraudulent registrations in. So they were describing it like, wow, I got my package today, wow. And the other one says, yeah, I got, 2,000 last week. And there are people that don't even know how to spell their own name. So they actually look, here's the guy who doesn't know how to spell his own name. They look him up, and his name is, James Jenkins or whatever. And then the guy's got Jenkins spelled wrong or something like that. So this type of thing they were mocking it and they were laughing at it. But the problem is they weren't letting the authorities know. Now, would they have let the authorities know if, in fact, we had a functioning Secretary of State that actually did really safeguard election security, then that might have changed things. As those same clerks that said, hey, did you see that appointment, or that be on the lookout bulletin from Dana Nethel telling us to watch out for this, for things that arriving in the mail that are all fraudulent. If that had been done, it would have been completely different, and the whole story would have blown up. And then the electors, the 16 electors, Dana Nessel, part of her case hinges on the idea that this is part of her case hinges on the idea that there was no evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. But it turns out there was evidence of fraud in the 2020 election, and she suppressed it from the public. Oh, we have a question now?
When you were talking about the clerks, jokingly about their frauds in the face, they technically committed a 14-year felony because they violated their oath of office. They found fraud, and they chose not to give it to the police. They can go to prison for that. That's serious.
I just want to for everyone in the room to hear that. What she's saying is that when the clerks, they take an oath of office, and there are certain laws that they have to file. When you don't report crimes, you're breaking your oath of office. And she's making the point that that actually is a felony and that they can actually be penalized for that too. And don't believe for 1 second that the corrupt attorney general wouldn't turn their backs on those clerks, because she sends them information that leads them to believe otherwise. So she will turn their backs on them in a heartbeat if they ever were to get prosecuted. So that is definitely something. There was another point to that too about the clerks.
And the penalty for violating your oath, you are supposed to immediately vacate your seat. Anything that you get involved in after that, you are personally culpable for. I said it wrong, but you get into a contract with somebody, you have to pay for it because you violated your oath. You were supposed to vacate your seat. You are no longer fit to hold that seat.
They actually, just so everyone knows too, we always get a lot of the infighting and that kind of stuff. You have to understand, these are criminal organizations, right? They will put ABC XYZ after their name. That doesn't make them a Democrat or a Republican. It makes them a criminal.
Amen. That's right.
Okay. So there are just the poll challenge. I don't want to get into off the track just a little bit on this. I'm sorry, but I just personally watched it out. Brayden and I lead the poll challenging for the state of Michigan now too. And I just watched Republicans being pitted against each other. One Republican poll challenger against a Republican poll inspector. And the reason that they're being pitted against, they should all be working on this. It doesn't really matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you're working an election, everybody should be working on the same team.
That's right. That's right.
But now we have two Republicans being pitted against each other. And the reason for that is the poll challenger who we have trained knew what the NCL laws were, right? The poll challenger is just as important as the poll inspectors. They get to be able to look at the exact same information, except the Secretary of State, the way that she divides Americans, because it's communism, the way that they do it is she came out with her guideline that is contradictory, word for word contradictory to the MCL.
That's right.
And she tells poll inspectors all over the state that poll challengers are insignificant and inferior, and that the poll inspectors are allowed to direct them to where to stand. That's how evil these people are. It's intentional, and it's, sorry, go ahead, I can tell.
Well, I just want to interject one thing. I don't want to stop everything. That was good. Everybody put that in. But with respect to the Secretary of State, she, in addition to everything you said about her, she is also a 5-time loser in court. One of those court cases was specifically related to that, which I was a part of, and Phil was a part of, what were specifically related to those rules that she made, which are blatantly illegal.
Yeah, but what comes of it?
It's still making.
Coming up in October, these oral arguments in our case. Okay, we won the case last October in the Court of Claims, and then what happened was the Secretary of State used your tax dollars to hire incredibly powerful lawyers, including the lawyer, the law firm. I want to say his name is
Perkins Court.
Perkins Court.
Oh, we heard
that's
that.
two for two.
So she brought in the principal from that firm who moved and formed his own firm. He brought in two of his people. Mark Elias, the guy from Perkins Court. So he formed a company, brought in two of his partners to send them into Michigan to help our Secretary of State. And they were paid for it with your tax dollars to defend the undefensible actions of the Secretary of State. So what happened was they actually took it to the Supreme Court. And in the Supreme Court, we had, well, I don't want to go into the detail because I don't want to mess with the case, but the Supreme Court granted a stay so that this, the ruling of the judge who decided for us did not have to take effect in the last election back last November. So she was able to still hold on to her corrupt system through that election. Then it went to appeal. So they appealed their loss. And then they made major, filings and everything. We did counter filings in the spring. And now it's at the point, it's really dragging on tremendously. But in October, it's going to be oral arguments. Both sides are going to go ahead and hopefully we'll get some type of a ruling before another election goes by.
Where?
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on that as well because there's a funny story there too. The reason that they got the stay, even though we won, was because she claimed essentially that she didn't have time to implement all the changes that it would take to make her rules legitimate. However, then after they ruled that, then they changed the rules right up near the election anyway, even closer to the election than we were giving them. They proved that they could do it. Now, I see another brilliant face in the audience, Mr. Tim Vetter. I didn't see him there. So Tim has been working with MIGOP and used to work at EIF with myself. We did some amazing work, and right now he's with a group called checkmyvote.org, which he founded, where you can go and see, you can check for illegitimate registrations and things like that, right? And so I want to make sure that I announce him and that everybody knows that he's here. He's another hero of this movement, and you guys should all recognize him as well.
To checkmyvote.org, what you will be doing as a citizen if you sign up to that group, or there's other groups too, boots on the ground, souls to the rolls. If you sign up for one of these organizations, you are going to directly be cleaning up the dirty QVF. The QVF that I just talked to one of the key people working in Public Interest Legal Foundation last week, maybe 10 days ago, and he is suing the Secretary of State, Benson, and she is defending his lawsuit with your tax dollars once again. And you know what he's trying to do? Well, he's suing her. He's suing her because he wants to remove 27,000 dead voters, confirmed dead voters from the Michigan, the dirty QVF. So he has to sue. They have to raise money to as a public interest legal foundation. That's the name of it. Built. They have to raise money to sue against these high-powered lawyers bought with your tax dollars by your corrupt SOS. So she wants to keep them on the rolls. The Public Interest Legal Foundation even went to the point so far as in the filings to the judge, they had pictures of the headstones of these people. Here lies, Joe Smith. He died such and such a time, and he's on the voter rolls right now. So, and Tim is on top of this. His team, and we've had a pretty substantial number of volunteers come on board, but we need more. So, if anybody is good with computers, spreadsheets, that kind of thing, we know your way around a computer, then get in touch with Tim Vetter. There's also the other groups, Souls to the Rolls and Boots on the Ground. Everybody plays a part. It's a team effort across the state of Michigan.
You all have a red card in front of you, which is the mydistrict9.org. That right there with that QR code, all of these different links that are being thrown at you. If you go there, that launches our website. So we have, Tim's link there to checkmyvote.org. We also have Foot Frost with the, all of the 16 electors there where you can help us raise money. It goes directly to their legal funds. So any of this other, a lot of links that are being thrown at you, if you at least just keep that card and go there, you'll be able to make the connections to all of them and help us raise money for there. Thank you. Yeah.
Lori, how many orange jumpsuits should we be ordering?
Okay. So we a lot of this is a lot of this we already kind of covered, you guys, but this is the election. When you go to our website, this will be up there shortly as well. But Michigan Republican Party, as already previously mentioned, Dr. Phil O'Halloran is now leading that and as the chair. We need the help. All of these are 18 steps that we need, but because election security happens every single day of the year. It's not just on election day. So we need an army of individuals and volunteers to help us fill these roles. We need poll inspectors, we need poll challengers, we need people behind the scenes that are getting the messaging team out. Michelle O'Halloran, back there with our team, lead our social media. So the days of the election, anything that, that is newsworthy, she's helping us get it. We're locked up, right? We're sequestered at TCF, so we don't know what's happening. So having people on the outside that are getting whatever messaging out there to the social media groups is imperative to us. We need lawyers. Anyone with legal background. We are so one-sided in this state. Lawyers, I had a lawyer who would legitimately wanted to help me, I believe, at TCF, and just really didn't understand. And she went back and she left TCF, and she came back to me a couple of weeks later, and she said, Lori, I want you to know, I tried to find any class that I could to teach me. She's like, we get CE stuff all the time. She was like, I could tell you any type of law that your dog broke its leg. There's a special CE course that you could take to how you would litigate that out. You know what they don't have here? Election law. She had to go to Minnesota. Wow. And that was it. That was one, and I think Texas might have had one, right? That's how, it's not even as if they don't want to help. They just don't have the education on it. And we know that was intentionally done. So again, this will be on our website, but anyone that the QPF team, which we are talking about with Sam here, the investigations team, Phil has done a great job putting all of this together across the state. And now we just need little armies in every county to help us actually implement it. So I'm going to take you back a little bit here too to the Dropbox monitor. So the Dropbox monitor, just to tie in one more context. So we were working way back when, and thankfully, again, it was Gateway Pundit that had funded all of the videos for us at TCF. So you guys remember right after 2020 with all of those, people with their masks up to their face and you couldn't tell who they were, and they were just dropping in ballots after ballots after ballots. That was the work of the team behind us that watched hundreds of hours of capturing all of that video. And that was Gateway Pundit that actually funded that for us. So that's a big thank you for that. The point to that is that you hear in the police that True the Vote kind of piggybacked on that, which was their GPS locations, right? They were starting to be able to track these people through the same software and the technology, which we were made fun of again, right? All of us, I can't tell you how many times I've been called a conspiracy theorist with all of this information. And then it turns out in the police report, guess what technology they were using to track the suspects through the story? So it all ties back. It's one dot after another dot after another dot, to where if you don't believe that there's something here, you're the problem, not us. So again, any of this you can find on our website.
What's our website?
mydistrict9.org. It's my as in the state of Michigan.
MI.
District. Yeah, well, yeah. I want everyone to understand that my is MY, because I use that a lot.
Get off there, Shirley. MIDISTRICT 9.org.
Instead of in your house, play that video for me. But Fred and Debbie Ross, is there anybody else here that are leading the recall? Megan? Yeah, so you're going to hear about some recall efforts that we are leading as well, or not leading, but we're trying to help as well too. So, right under.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
No, I want to play the video.
Oh, what video?
Stop it now.
So,
Oakland and Macomb Patriots, how would you like to go on offense and take back the House in 2023? We've taken a whole lot of abuse from the hands of Democrats ever since they seized total control in Lansing. This raw power has gone to their heads, it's emboldened them, and now they are even prosecuting innocent people for purely political reasons. This abuse of power must not stand. There is a legal way to do this under Michigan law. It's called a recall. Several are in the works right now across the state pending approval by the Board of Canvassers. One in Troy, targeting Democrat State Rep Sharon McDonald, was just approved this week. Now, we need volunteers to obtain enough signed petitions to force the special recall election later this year. A lot of Republicans are angry by this well-funded, tightly disciplined Democrat machine and what it's done to our party, our citizens, and to the rule of law in this state. They are infuriated with the malicious prosecution of the 16 electors. You must act now and be willing to do something about it. We must organize against the neo-Marxists who have seized power in Lansing and are ramming their un-American, unconstitutional laws down our throats. How will the recall work? We need all hands on deck. To learn more on how you can help, please email mihoused56recall@outlook.com. Please join us and bring family and friends who finally want to go on the offense and empower patriots to win. We're tired of playing defense. We are tired of the weak, inefficient Republicans who continually did nothing time and time and time again. So we're going to implore you to please get aggressive with us. And to Lisa's point, I don't know how many more orange jumpsuits are going to be ordered for us, but we need an army of people to help us because it's going to be a lot harder to take us all down if we stand together and united. So, amen.
We have to say this peacefully and legally. And also, it's amazing that we have to say that, but we do. And then also, remember midistrict9.org to sign up. And
these two former attorneys, Eddie Powell and Ken Chesborough.
Just mute it. There we go. We're done. We're done with that thing. Acknowledge it.
So, guys, I think what we're going to do now, we want to have a panel discussion, and we would like to invite Chris Kaala up here to join us, and he can ask some questions. This is the guy, it all kind of started with him, so be sure to ask him the questions you like, and we're all here to answer anything you have for the next
Okay, so we will take a question. Before we hop into questions, I got a question.
Wait, where do you want me?
No, you got to sit there. You just, take your seats. I'll bring the mic back over so we can answer. One of the questions was there was multiple offices at GBI. Did anybody do any investigation to where there are spikes in registrations at these other states or these other cities?
Yes, there was one. You go to Gateway Pundit.
Wait.
Can you hear me for here?
No, Ken.
Oh, can you hear me in the back?
No.
Hey,
No,
take that
doesn't
back.
seem to be
No,
on.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
It's on. You just gotta get closer. Intimate, really.
Can't get intimate with a stand on there. You have to eat this mic for it to work. Right, so there's a Gateway Pundit article that came out. I gave a histogram to Ben Wetmore. You can find it in about a week ago. There was a spike that the Muskegon GOP Elections Committee found. By the way, I formed the Elections Committee after we took over the Republican Party in Muskegon County.
Bravo.
I was the chairman of that.
Bravo.
Linda Pago and Zach Laring were the vice chair and the chair. I did that committee for 2 years. We put out a report in the beginning of May. If you want to copy that report, the Gateway Pundit put out an article and referenced it. I think you can download it there. Or you can go to Election Integrity Force, where I'm a leader on that team, and get it from us, or you can get it from me directly from the Muskegon County GOP. But 24 pages of data that have all to do with the qualified voter file and the voting system in Muskegon County. So we noted back in when that report was written that there was a spike of almost 2,000 votes that came in on October 9th. We didn't know that GBI was doing their thing. We didn't know what dates they were around or anything. We just said this is not right, partly because Muskegon County doesn't grow. We have 400 people a year that move into our county. We gained 4,000 people in 10 years over the last census. 2,001 days is a lot, but we have the hockey stick climate change voter registration chart that shows that our county had 17,000 registrations added to it in a 12-month period before our elections. Okay, 12,000 of those came in from the Secretary of State. Okay, these are not real people. We're only supposed to have 115,000 real voters. You know, and if you have 100% voter registration, you'd be at 136,000. Okay, and at the time of the election, we had 148,000 registered in our county. Okay, so take it 148 to 5, subtract 115. This is what got my battery charged up. And a 64% turnout in Muskegon for that election is ridiculous. It's because of the way they do the numbers. President Trump lost by 510 votes in our county. Now, he was ahead by 19 votes the day after the election. But our county clerk had trouble counting the numbers. Can you guess how many days it took her to finish?
7.
10 days. 10 days to get the count done right. I actually ran for county commissioner. I was ahead with 65% of the vote after election day. 52% of the vote came in as absentee ballots. 1,600 out of 8,000 were people that had never voted in 10 years. When we canvassed, we found somewhere between 25 and 40% of those were not real, or they moved out of the county well before the election took place. That's nice. So I have loads and loads of data in my head. It'll drive you crazy.
All right, so let's get the questions. Who we got in the audience? Go ahead.
I wondered if you could speak to 3 things. I wondered if you could speak to 3 things. First of all, Uber drivers that were picking up people from the airport, taking them to hotels, and speaking to Uber drivers because they were so excited about the money they were going to be getting paid to do these registrations. because there's a lot of them out there. So if we can get them to come forward, would that be helpful? Because I know one of one. Another thing is the United States Postal Service. I believe there is a lot with the United States Postal Service involved. I've even seen people move into neighborhoods that would not seem to otherwise be able to afford those neighborhoods, but all of a sudden just appear and happen to work for the Postal Service. And then also, Benson and Nestle took oaths too. So how do we take them down? Good question.
All right, I'm gonna leave this to you guys. Okay, this is the easy part.
Okay, first of all, the Uber driver, that's really interesting and not really, we just.
They were picking them up from the airports and bringing them in, and some of them were chatty.
Do you have any documentation on that, or where?
I can try and get one. I mean, it was
Hold on,
three.
Hold on, time out, everybody. This is where we go to the whistleblower.com website, right? So we put this information. What did that website again, Rick?
Whistleblower at migop.org.
So whistleblower at migop.org. Please write that.
Yeah, I have a response to this one. Okay, so we could be here for 3 hours and we could tell you stuff that would occur here. You go to Courtney Turner. I spent 2 hours talking with Jason Ikes about this situation. Bottom line, if you cut to the chase, what we have here is the potential ballot harvesting operation in Muskegon. It's 2,000 mules. If you have a box full of unpaid or prepaid cards, you're either paying your employees, which means you're not going to pay taxes, or you're giving it to people to buy their ballots. Now, on the surface, everything is completely legal. You go to the door, you get the registration, have them sign it. They don't care. You say, just sign this ballot application form. They sign that. They send it in. They follow the ballots. They go to the house 2 days after it's sent from the clerk. They say, you know, you really don't want to be doing this. Why don't you just give it to us? And for your trouble, I'll give you a $50 card. Now, in Grand Rapids, there's a photo of a guy, a pickup truck with a sign that says $25 for your ballot. He's outside of the homeless shelter. Okay? But if you look at it, GBI is not the only group out there, the only NGO. If you watch the 2,000 Mules thing, a lot of people came from certain states. They went to the swing states. They processed these ballots, right? GBI Strategies had a scanner, okay? They're getting registrations, scanning them so they can fill out their database and get them into the system. The thing we don't know is how many registrations there really were, because I have an eyewitness who was in electoral inspection training, and she said that the clerk Ann Meesh told them that she threw all these away. Now that's not a good thing, right? Because that's evidence of election fraud.
That's right.
I know there's people in her office that are really patriots. They believe in the truth and the rule of law. And somebody said we have to turn these in, and that's how the report was made. But people coming into the state from outside the state, the person who's uncovered the GBI story actually lives in Muskegon. I know a person who knows her personally, went to high school with her. That office in my intel is still open. Nobody should report this because they're operating community organizing type events like this all over the state. Muskegon has been dark blue forever, and they've been losing Democratic votes, been hemorrhaging them. And I'm convinced that the reason they were in Muskegon is they couldn't afford to lose that county, because if they did, they would lose the county commission. I would have been the swing vote in 2020 to the county commission. We would have owned it. Okay? And right now, it's all Democrat.
It's also bellwethers, right? So you see places that are enclaves. If they start to go the other way, oh yeah, it's bellwethers. You know, the Muskegon's a bellwether. It's a cross section of a lot of working class people. It's a cross section of affluency. So it's really kind of a microcosm for the state. You know that,
right? And it was a bellwether. It was in the news that we were going to be somebody to watch. That's why they had to be there. But Seth Keshel said that the margin of victory this election was going to be somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 votes. Well, we had 8,000 to 10,000 ballots or registrations
in in process there that they could have been used. You got 10 days. You can drop all kinds of ballots everywhere.
Yep.
There was only one ballot box in our whole county, and that's why True the Vote didn't.
Hey, Chris, I got a question for you. Does anybody on the panel know, okay, so we hear a lot about registrations. Registrations aren't votes, they're not ballots, but is there a metric? Is there a metric for registrations equaling votes either for Republicans or for Democrats? What is that metric?
I'm not sure what metric you're talking about.
Maybe these guys do.
I think if you could get a certain percentage of people, if you can get a certain number of registrations, I want to say it's 50%.
2 to 1.
2 to 1, yeah. So 2 to 1. That means so basically, if you can get one of these companies, and these companies are, by the way, they're paid by these dark money Democrat organizations, and so the dark money Democrats, it's an investment. They're figuring if we can get 100,000 people registered in Michigan, we can get 50,000 new fresh Democrat votes. And it's illegal for a nonprofit, so 501(c) organization. It's illegal for them to act in a partisan way, but yet that's what all these organizations are doing. There's going to be more stuff coming out on Gateway Pundit coming up in the not too distant future, and it's going to tell you more about these organizations and how they're able to somehow get away with this, where they're breaking the law because they're violating FCC regulations. So you cannot, if you're a nonprofit, you get tax breaks, okay? But it comes at a cost. You cannot be partisan. So you cannot favor Democrats, right? But they do it all the time. And it's linked with this story. It's also linked with our friend Bob Cushman's story, which is Smurfs. Yeah. So what is a Smurf? A Smurf is initially it was a concept in the drug trade, and a Smurf was like a micro money launderer. So they would pass around small amounts of money because they're under the radar. So a Smurf in the election context initially started with a guy named, I think it was Breniger up in Wisconsin, and then he talked with James O'Keefe, formerly of Veritas. And so James O'Keefe started going around, I think it was Maryland, knocking on doors of people, and what they found was that individuals a lot of them were seniors, and a lot of them were Democrats, most of them were Democrats. They didn't know that all these donations were being made in their name. Now, the idea of a micro donation, like a very tiny amount, would be like $3.67, right? Or $5.82. So these multiple, we're talking about like one person, one Smurf in Michigan, or I think he was in North Carolina, 9,000. Identified, yeah, like there was like 9,000 donations, right? And then the total was like $27,000. So the amount per donation was like $3.83, something like that. So what they do is they looked into these Smurfs, and they knock on their doors. They say, "Did you know that you donated $99,000 over the last 3 years to this group called Act Blue, which is a Democrat dark money group?" And they would say, "No, I've never done anything like that. I don't have that kind of money." Well, this is what the FEC says, and they have lists. You can go to these sites and you can look at the list, and you can go down through literally tens of thousands of tiny little donations of $1.60 and $8.79, and these are under the names. And again, this is like donor identity theft, and it's highly illegal, and it's blowing up right now. And Bob Cushman is looking at connections with what we're seeing in the Michigan story that we're talking about today. So that's going to go further.
We're going to take a question from them too, but I'm going to think back really quick. This is a funny story, you guys. Are not really funny, but ironic. It's part of that investigation when Phil had sent over all of the information. We started diving in and just researching and watching all of how the money, follow the money, right? The money trail. So there's a FEC filing report out there that GBI Strategies had paid $242,000 to both Joe Biden and Senator Gary Peters. And when I started looking, I'm like, well, That goes up to a much bigger patch called the black patch. Black patch is when you go there, looks like they're running money for black people, right? Except they're funneling, it's a bunch of white elitists that funnel the money to Gary Peters to beat John James.
Oh.
It's the irony. It's not lost on anybody. So with Cushman, we've got the money trail, right? Now with Chris, we've got the registrations, right? Now we just got to figure out how we can find out the ballot situation. We might have this thing circled. Go ahead. You got a question, Mr. Rutter?
Yes, sir. Phil, this question is for you. We talked about nonprofits and the issue with that. Can you explain why checkmyvote.org is set up as a for-profit company and website?
Partisan.
Yeah. So, so kind of like a political consultancy, essentially. So similar, what happens is that you can actually, if you have a 501(c) organization, then you have to maintain this kind of impartiality. Whereas in Tim's case with Election Eagle, this company is essentially have to be for-profit because then he can be hired by MIGOP directly, which is what we're doing, so that he can work for us on that. Is that what you were getting at, Tim?
Well, I'd like to add more.
Yeah. Tim deserves the talk on this.
Amen.
That's helping this whole situation.
Let me just quickly explain the importance of why we're set up as a for-profit company. Everyone has heard about the baker who wants to deny service to a lesbian couple because it's against his belief.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we as a company, we want to deny service to those who don't believe in our philosophy of election integrity. Everyone's going to say we're for election integrity, but on the back end of Check My Vote, what we're doing with that is we're collecting data from all of you, the people. You go to checkmyvote.org and you're going to be able to check which registrations are at your address. So, for example, this is Warren Carpenter's. I got his voter registration card here, and then there's a family of 5. They are the Lockett family. Yep. Lyman and all that. And Lenora. All that.
He knows them all.
Yep.
So what do you do about that? What you do is you go to checkmyvote.org. You mark off all those registrations that dead people, they don't live here. They moved out of the country, out of the states. You mark off, that goes into the back end. And we are making sure that we're using that information with the GOP to absolutely stop votes that go against all the ballots that you are blinding. And we're going to stop them from being able to ballot harvest and put votes against all these registrations that we, the people, are saying do not, we have the offline QBS. That's what we're developing.
So for equal time, everybody needs to get involved. We need more of these organizations. So I'm on the leadership of Election Integrity Force. Tim was doing that before. I'm a poll challenger, a trainer. I challenged in the city of Muskegon the last 3 elections. I had my challenger rights denied 3 times. Can't find a lawyer to prosecute it. Okay, because nobody cares about Muskegon. Nobody cares about one little thing. The lawyers want these big cases. But it's the little things that make a difference, okay? Now, Election Integrity Force, back when both of us were on it, we developed a technology to clean the voter roll, okay, to find out who is not a valid voter. And there's a certain segment that we can identify. And I developed the technology to walk into a walk-in precinct or an AV counting board and challenge those ballots legally. When you challenge the ballots, you have more challenged ballots and you have a difference in the election. You can take it to a judge and overturn the election.
That's considered determinative.
This is why they don't want challengers. This is why they're taking away your right. Okay? The challenger rules were changed specifically to deny our right. So if you want to change the election, you don't have to wait for a silver bullet. You need to get in there and be a challenger and know how to do this.
All right, we got one more. So we had a suggestion from the gentleman here in the orange shirt that said, if everybody in this room told 10 people that they were their friends to go on to make sure that only the registrations in their household are valid, that would go a long way to putting a thorn on the side of the Democrats who are trying to inflate the rolls. It's going to be a battle between today and 2024 of constantly inflating the rolls and us trying to correct them trying to inflate them and us trying to correct them. So I got another question right here.
Have you compared the electronic poll books to the QTF files? And if you haven't, maybe Tim can talk about the 5 we've given him.
Well, I'll tell you that I FOIA'd the CAT vote record. I sent our county clerk a request and wanted a list of all the people that voted in 2020. They were unable to give me that list for 86 days. They didn't know my FOIA was in their box because nobody had ever asked them for almost anything. And they were short 6,000 votes. There are 6,000 votes missing in Muskegon. I gave it to the sheriff. I said, I asked for it 3 times. They gave me 3 lists. All 3 are short 6,000 plus or minus a couple of hundred. And he got some bogus answer from the city clerk, who since resigned, by the way. That's another relief. Okay? But there's all kinds of these things that are out there. The poll books themselves, they denied us because they refused to redact them. They said there was personal information here. Okay, you ever heard of redaction? No. But in order to get those, we'll have to sue and find a lawyer.
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, just real quick, the poll book question. Repeat the question.
Have we compared the poll books to the QBF files?
The answer is no, because many of the poll books are inaccessible. But the key problem that we're having is that the Secretary of State is changing your vote history location. So let me give you a number, and this is the locus standi from EIF. There are 468,000 in the November 2020 election. That's how many locations have been changed. Why is that an issue? It's an issue because if you're trying to compare the QBF to the poll books, they changed the location. You can't figure out 30% of where people have voted because they changed where you voted. So you're trying to compare the QBF to a poll book, and very little is matching up. That is on purpose. That's fraud, and that's what the locus standi is going after.
So locus standi is a criminal complaint that's being gone after. That, and I worked with a guy named Scott Ogney. The guy is like a junkyard dog with this.
Scott's a good guy.
He's a very, very determined man, and it's really fun. I've been to probably 20 cities with him, explaining this locus standi with him, and going over recount results. And he's not going to give up, and that's what Tim is talking about. Where if you look at your digital file, they're altering the timestamps of things, and they can't explain it. They're altering the locations from where you're voting and all these other things. And there are very clear laws about why that's illegal and how those are felonies and what the penalty should be for that. So definitely, if you see Scott Ogney, tell him we sent you and help him out because he needs your support as well to file criminal complaints in your counties because you guys, all this stuff has to be ground up. It has to be a groundswell. The pressure has to come from the bottom. Nobody at the top come to save us. So Scott Ogney, remember that name, remember locus standi, and I know he's working with EIF, but he's his own guy. So, and that's the beauty of this. We have multiple organizations working together, but they're doing their own thing so that nobody gets stuck in some big umbrella corporation, and then everything gets lost, and we focus on the one thing, and it might be the wrong thing.
Go ahead, Fred.
I think you probably know, Scott had said it's not your local clerks that are doing the changes. And where is it being, when the records are being merged? Where is the change being made?
So there's various levels of evil or corruption, right? And the base level is decent people, decent clerks just going along because this is how they've done it for years. They don't know anything. They don't know any better. They're told by the clerk, but when we come to them and tell them there's this kind of fraud, we show them all this data from Tim, from MIGOP, from EIF, from MFE, from whoever. We show them the data, and then they say, oh, that's interesting at first, 3 years ago. And then the Secretary of State tells them, don't talk to these people, they're crazy.
Yep.
They get Nancy Gantz, the Secretary of State, who spends all her money and time trying to prevent us from exposing this stuff. And they believe the Secretary of State because that's their boss, and this is the way they've done it. So, well, in their mind, I'm saying in their mind. So all I'm trying to get at is your clerks aren't necessarily your enemy, and most of the time they're just doing their job. And if you can show them enough and show them the stuff we've shown here today, that these are big problems and that there's plenty of data and the police reports show it, it's not just crazy people on a stage, you guys will have a chance at working with your clerks rather than turning them all into your enemies.
So I tried working with the clerk, right?
Yeah.
So specifically for Chris,
sorry.
I want to know more about getting the actual cast vote records. When I tried, I was denied. I didn't file the FOIA correctly. I went to the clerk because the city sent me to the county clerk. Clerk said, oh no, you can't FOIA that for at least 30 days after the election, which seems like a bunch of crap if you ask me. But if you go to the city clerks, they say they don't have the records. We pass them off to the county. But is that just the paper tape that says the cast vote record? But yet all of the ballots and applications and such all exist still at the city. I mean, where did I go wrong?
And this is the last question, so we got to wrap up. Yeah.
So there's a lot of weeds here, and that's the problem with this whole situation. This is death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, there's two different kinds of cast vote records. The one that you've heard from Lone Raccoon or these other guys, like Lady Draza, is the report of when a vote was cast, at what time, and who it was cast for. That's an electronic record that comes into the county. That shows the graph, they converge, or one goes up or down. What I asked for was a list of people, their names, addresses, and jurisdictions. That's public information. You can get that. If you ask for that other record, I asked for the other record, they were like, their eyes crossed over in their head, they rolled back, they didn't even know what that was. The IT people don't know how to do that. From Lindell, you can get the specific verbiage to show them how to do it step by step. They still can't manage it. Okay, but when you ask for the people, and you compare that against the voter report that the county clerk puts out, okay, I was supposed to have 96,000 voters and change, and I got back a record of 90,400. Now, it's possible the Secretary of State is either stupid, inept, or Bethany Wheeler says that the system is screwed up and they don't know how to fix it. And it could be 1,000 things. But EIF developed this idea, and I was the one who started it. You get the NCOA data from the post office. How many people put in permanent change of address? And if they've moved 30 days before the election, they're not a valid elector. Okay? And I have 8,000 of those in my county alone. I have 30,000 excess registrations. So if you want to clear the rolls, EIF can give you a list of the people that are expired, people that the U.S. Postal Service will not deliver to because they know there's nobody there. You get those lists to your clerks, and some clerks will go after it like crazy. The other ones, you're going to have to vote their behinds out of office.
I've got a request from Scott Ogden. I need to share. I know you want
Yep.
to come.
Okay.
Okay.
You want a mic?
Scott's been told that some jurors, I think I got big enough vocal for it.
Well, for the video.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
No, use the mic, please.
Scott's concerned that some municipalities are being told by the BOE and SOS to stop giving us our voting records. We're trying to find, he's asking everybody, even if you already got your voting records, go back and ask for another one. I cannot do it just because I've been there so damn many times doing stuff like this, they recognize me. And get that information to Michael Butts, Scott Ogden, myself, the GOP office. We need to know what's happening if they're stopping in certain municipalities. For instance, I was able to get 4 local standing complaints filed in Chesterfield, and I'm hoping to get another 20 by the end of the month. Scott Michael have trained me in helping people file their local standing complaints. It's not hard, it's not complicated, it's not dangerous, and doesn't cost a penny. So anybody wants help with that, I'll probably be calling you in the next month or so.
Beautiful.
So they can see you afterwards?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so see him afterwards.
Okay, so just some real quick housekeeping. First of all, I want to thank all the members from the D9 EC and all their hard work. I want to make a real quick plea again for Cliff Frost. Okay, everybody. There's a Venmo, so it's Venmo at Cliff-Frost-Elector or Give Send Go Frost Defense. I would rather you guys pull out of your pocket and give money to this man in the district right now. We'll be just fine. Please find it in your hearts to support these people. And then finally, before I wrap, we had Megan from the recall effort. If she could take a stand real quick, stand up. And then
if you're interested in volunteering to help with the recall, Megan is taking names and numbers. If you're interested in helping with the recall, Megan is taking names and numbers. Please see her afterwards. She's standing in the back there. Wave, Megan. So what are and one other thing, if everybody would take some of the cards that were on your table, they're out on the table as you're going out, and distribute them with your family and friends. Thank you.
All right, one last thing. I'll turn it back over to these dudes. One last thing that I wanted to say is thank you all for coming out to understand and hear more about this story. When this story first broke, we were all sitting and we were watching it together. And I told Phil, I texted him about an hour and a half later. I said, this is the biggest story in America. He was like, what are you talking about? I said, you don't understand. I said, this is going to be the biggest story in America, and it's going to be the biggest story in America for weeks. We're going into a month now. This story's going, and it's just getting started. There are a ton more things that are going to come out of this. But finally, I want to say this. For your participation, for showing up, if you left your email address or you signed up online, what I will do is I will make sure that I pull some of the documentation that's publicly available for this and get you copies of the FOIAs that were available sent to your emails for being participants and coming to the event. I want to say thank you to everybody here before I turn it over to this team, but thank you guys so much.
Guys, that's fantastic. Also, if you want to volunteer, I urge you to volunteer on election integrity. Okay, so we've got 18 different areas of responsibility. So it's something for everybody. If you're a really nosy, kind of intrusive, kind of assertive person, challenging could be for you. So if you're somebody who's more of a detail-oriented computer person, we've got checkmyvote.org, and we've got the data collection analysis. And if you're a writer, the messaging, it goes on. So there's something for everybody, and that also means there's no excuses. So even if you're unable to walk around, you have bad arthritis, whatever, we have the job for you still. One other, just an announcement here, and that is that in this same Shelby Gardens here on November 2nd, we got a big event, and it's going to be it's going to feature some major speakers, including Pat Kolbeck, Christina Caramo, Brigadier General Doug Slocum. Okay, and it's going to be a freedom event. Okay, so the freedom fighters. So this is a big thing. It's going to be right here at Shelby Gardens, November 2nd, and you're going to hear Chair Caramo and other people like Pat Kolbeck. So thanks for everybody coming down. Let me just hand over to Lori.
I want to thank all of the original patriots like Dr. Phil and Mark Horton and Cliff Frost. For those of you that have been in this fight forever, thank you, thank you, thank you. They have led the way for us. They have given us this path, and now it's time that they hand this over and let all of us join them in continuing this fight so that we're not leaving them on the sidelines again. So thank you.
Yeah, and just want to remind you that if you're going to be a challenger, if you want to make a difference, we're going to need more than one organization training challengers because the rules changed. You only let one person per organization in an 80 county board. You need two there so you can be the witness to the other person when they get their challenger rights violated. You probably need three, especially at bigger places. EIF, I will personally be training. This year, these guys are going to be training. Get spread around, get two different credentials. So if you show up and somebody else got a different one, you can pull a second one out of your pocket. But EIF is a good organization doing similar stuff to Tim in a kind of a different way. And the last word is, you want to see the cavalry? Look in the mirror. It's you. If you don't do this, it won't happen. Thanks.
Yeah, to piggyback on what he said, I absolutely want you guys to sign up for pole challenging with Lori and myself, Phil, and with his organization, Election Integrity Force, who I used to be with as well. It was awesome. I used to head that up, and we need both organizations because, like he said, they're going to limit us and do anything they can to prevent us. We need to work together, band together, and make sure that we do the best we can. In addition to that, I want to make sure that I plug midistrict9.org. We have several FOIAs that are going to total tens of thousands of dollars in order to continue the work that we're doing here. We already have them lined up, but we need the money to do it. We know what we need to do. We've got it written out, but we can't afford to get the FOIAs we need to push this a little bit further, a lot further.
Like $10.
Even, yeah, so if you guys, so nobody has to donate 10 grand and stuff, but every $2 counts, every $5 counts. If everybody in this room could donate $5, we would have enough for the next FOIA. So if you guys can visit midistrict9.org, there's 2 donation buttons, one for MI District 9 and one for just election donations. I really want to plug that because we really want to push this story forward for Michigan. We're the leaders now. Everybody used to look at Michigan as the worst, but because we're the worst, there's so much more evidence that we can find to blow this all open. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
If you filled out the cards on your table to volunteer, can you please bring them over to where I was sitting? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I think I got some good. Tell her it has to be cat. Tell her check has to be checked. Or to District 9. Right now.